Straight into it.
All right. Well, this is my favorite time of the day, except maybe for a little bit later on today. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is Bev Vincent. And I know that many of you know who Bev is, but I'm going to let you know a little bit about why he's here. Bev Vincent is the author of The Dark Tower Companion, The Road to the Dark Tower, which is a Bram Stoker Award-nominated companion to Stephen King's Dark Tower series, and the Stephen King Illustrated Companion, which was nominated for a 2010 Edgar Award and a 2009 Bram Stoker Award. In 2018, he co-edited the anthology Flight or Fright with Stephen King. Bev's short fiction has appeared in places like Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine, Borderlands 5, Ice Cold, and The Blue Religion. 4 stories were collected in When the Night Comes Down, and another 4 in a CD Select ebook. His story, The Bank Job, won the Al Blanchard Award. The Honey Trap from Ice Cold was nominated for an ITW Thriller Award in 2015, and Zombies on a Plane was nominated for an Ignitus Award in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that the Stephen King Rules Dollar Baby Film Festival welcomes Bev Vincent to the screen.
Very happy to be here.
And how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing just fine. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just great, absolutely. Excellent. And I presume that you're hailing from Texas at the present time?
Just outside of Houston, Texas. Yep.
Excellent. Well, Houston, Texas is where you call home now, but we happen to know, yes, love the hat. We happen to know that you're a fellow Canadian. Can you tell us a little bit about where you're from and what it was like growing up there?
Okay, so I'm originally from a very small community in northern New Brunswick called Charlotte. I went to school in Dalhousie, New Brunswick, from which you can look across the bay and see Quebec. I graduated in 1979 and then went to Dalhousie University for most of the 1980s, getting my 2 degrees there. So I lived in Halifax for quite a long time before I ended up in Switzerland, and then now I've been in Texas for 32 years.
Awesome. Well, and we'll get to your writing in a moment, but we've had a chance to get to know each other a little bit over the last few years, and as you know, I am very fascinated by what it is that you do apart from writing in your everyday life. So you mentioned the 2 degrees that you got. Can you tell us a little bit about what your education is in and how you've parlayed that into an amazing career?
So I have a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and then a PhD in Chemistry. And my specialization is something called X-ray crystallography, X-ray diffraction. And it's an analytical technique where you shoot X-rays at crystals, and the X-rays are scattered like a diffraction grating by the crystals, and you can use that to calculate not only what the molecule is, but how they're packed together in a 3-dimensional network inside the crystal. And so we use that to determine what somebody's made in the lab sometimes. Sometimes they just throw things in a pot and you get a compound at the end, and if you can get a crystal of it, we can tell them exactly what they made. But in other markets, it's used in protein science, if you're trying to find a drug to interact with a protein, if you can crystallize the protein and determine its 3-dimensional structure, then you can actually design drugs on a computer that you think might interact with the active sites on the protein. So that's the single crystal side of what I've done for my research. I came into the company in 1989 doing crystallography as a commercial service. People would send us their samples and we would do the analysis for them if they didn't have the equipment. And I've migrated into a variety of different roles since then. I've done a lot of software development, and now mostly I'm in web development.
Fantastic. And of course, this is very science, but it also has a magic quality to it as far as I'm concerned. And it does, in fact, sound like something you might see in a Stephen King or a Bev Vincent story. Many different things come to mind, including one of the Dollar Babies that we saw, Everything's Eventual. There's the sort of iconography dealing with the sort of psychic ability that the fellow has. And I know that this is much more hardcore science, but I just am thrilled every time you talk about it because it just is like magic to me. And if I may say, you actually have some of that, some of the machines that you've worked on Mars. Is that right?
The analysis techniques that expand using X-rays that expand beyond single crystal. So there's general X-ray diffraction where you can analyze powders, and X-ray fluorescence where you can determine the elements that are in things. Those have been miniaturized to the extent where they have now got them on Mars, so that when the rover uses its laser beam to dig some holes, they can do some analysis to find out what the composition is of the rocks that he's digging up.
That's amazing. And, you know, we have a lot of dollar babies here who have done a lot of great things, but I think you're probably the one person that we can say has some of his work on Mars.
Well, actually, my name is there too. There was a thing when the last rover went up where you could send your name in, and there's a little microchip on the rover that has people's names, and there's like hundreds of thousands of them, but my name is one of them.
That's fantastic.
Really amazing. We don't have that, so.
That's true. So you've got this amazing thing that you're doing, which obviously must take a lot of your brain power, and yet you're also a prolific author. So how did that happen? Like, how did you obviously not transition from one to the other, but when did writing come into your life and sort of become this other major thing that you do?
I wrote a reasonable amount while I was in university. I did around the time that I discovered Stephen King. I decided I wanted to write short stories that were like Stephen King, and so I have probably 15 or 20 stories from the 1980s that I used to write and then just read them to my, the other students in the dormitory. Never submitted them to anything. And then, once I got into the doctoral work, I didn't have as much time, and then. It took me a while to get back to writing again as a sort of something to do on the side. About 1999, I decided I wanted to get back into it again and started writing and submitting stories. And not long after that, too, that I ended up working with Cemetery Dance magazine and doing the column for their magazine. But it's interesting. The two halves of my brain they work very differently. There's not a whole lot of science in the stories that I write. Occasionally there'll be a scientist, but I don't write about X-ray crystallography in my fiction. I get up in the morning and I write from 5 until about 7:30, and then I transition and I do the day job, and they're kept very, very separate.
And all right, so and I'm sure a number of our viewers already know this, but you are also a dollar baby in your own right. You wrote the script for an adaptation, which I hope we can talk about in a moment. But if I remember it correctly, you actually knew Stephen King before you wrote that dollar baby. Is that correct?
So let me think about the timeline here. So 2004, 2005. I mean, I had met him in person for the first time in 1987. I was living in College Station, Texas for a few months before I went off and did my postdoc. And he was touring with Don Robertson to support the book that he had published, The Ideal Genuine Man, through his Philtrum Press. And he had an appearance in Houston, and I took the Greyhound bus 90 miles down into Houston to attend that signing. So I actually met him then. By the time 2005 came along, yes, we were corresponding because I had worked on and published The Road to the Dark Tower by that point. So yes, we knew each other a little bit, not to the extent that we've developed over the years, but a little bit.
And the reason I ask that is because although unfortunately I've never gotten a chance to see your dollar baby, I do understand that it's one of the few, if not the only one, that Stephen King actually is in. Can you tell us about the dollar baby and then tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so the short story was called Lunch at the Gotham Cafe. It originally appeared in an anthology, and then it was collected in 6 stories, which King published in Philtrum Press, and then later collected in Everything's Eventual. The dollar baby is called Stephen King's Gotham Cafe, and I believe we have the honor of being the only dollar baby that has been given permission to put King's name on the title. The producer behind the project was a woman named Julie Sands, who brought it to me. She knew of my work in Cemetery Dance, and she was asking for some advice about how to approach King and how to develop one of these. And my advice to her at the very beginning was to have a good script. And so she turned around and says, well, would you want to write a script? And I had no experience of screenwriting at that point at all. But I always game to try something new. So I said, sure. And I got Final Draft and learned how to use that, and developed a script that had a few. I mean, I knew that we were working with some limitations. She wanted it to be under 15 minutes because that was the criterion for a lot of film festivals at the time. Filming outdoors in Los Angeles presents all sorts of problems with getting licensing and permissions and things like that. So we had to put as much of it indoors as possible. But we came up with a first draft, and then she and another writer named Peter Schink worked on it as well, and they sort of added some more stylistic parts to it and also some more character-specific motivational stuff. And then we went back and forth with it, and then they shot it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be present during the shooting, but I used to get set reports on a regular basis as they were filming. And so we have some interesting cameos. The first is Mick Garris, the director who has done so many King projects. He's there as a priest. One of our producers is Steve Wozniak of Apple Computer, and he has a brief cameo in it as an angry patron at the restaurant when things go to hell. And Stephen King calls in and does a voice cameo as the main character's lawyer. And so we hear him, but we don't see him.
That's pretty spectacular. And I know that for reasons of whether we're going to talk about those or not, that unfortunately this isn't one of the dollar babies that we could screen at this festival. And I don't think that it's really available much at all to see anymore.
Yeah, there's a very low quality trailer that you can find on YouTube. But the music rights for the music that was used in the film have lapsed. And so the movie can't be shown anymore.
Right. So if there is any one of those, go ahead.
So the main character, outside of the man and woman who are having their marital breakup, is Guy the maitre d', who, for reasons of his own, just is having a very, very bad day and goes berserk in the restaurant. And one of the coolest things about this adaptation is the guy that they got to play this role, his name is Cullen Douglas, is just absolutely perfect. I mean, he is on the screen everything that I could have imagined when I read the story in my mind, and he just makes this thing sing, because playing insanity is not always an easy thing to do, and he just goes the whole spectrum of sort of almost like the paranoia thing to the full-on bring out the knife and create a little mayhem sort of thing. So he was great.
Oh, I'm sure it would be great if there was ever a time that we could see that. I know that some of the filmmakers were talking about bootleg VHSs back from the day. Maybe there's one floating around. I mean, that was 2005, so I guess it would have to be a bootleg DVD. But yeah, it's really cool that you had that experience and that there were so many interesting people that were involved in it, for sure.
Yeah, it was fun, and then it went on the festival circuit. It played all across North America, including several in Canada. I think it went down to Argentina at one point. So it had quite a good run. It won a number of awards. I have one hanging in the wall here for the screenplay from one of the festivals, and yeah, it was a great experience.
Fantastic.
We even got to take it to Bangor and screen it for Stephen King.
Aha, that's nice.
Yeah, the producers rented a movie theater in Orono, and they transferred it to film and ran it in the movie theater. And there was like 5 or 6 of us in the movie theater watching it.
Fantastic. Did you have?
Oh, people love you, Bev. Like, I'm just gonna like between my phone and the giant screens of YouTube, there's like hearts and saying how cool you are. So maybe we should answer a couple of these questions, so
Sure.
I don't get stalked after the event's over. But This one comes to us from Bob Beamer63 on Twitter. He's curious about what your favorite signed book or gift or most unusual gift from Mr. King might be.
I know, Bob.
So he should know this answer?
Well, I don't know if he would know it or not. There was a fundraiser for one of the audiobook narrators who did a whole series of King's books who was injured in a car accident and a motorcycle wreck. And I went to the fundraiser in New York. John Grisham was there, and Pat Conroy, and Peter Straub, and Steve. And I had this idea of a way to raise some more money for this benefit. And as a thank you for it, I got this package one day, which is a little yellow, just a standard yellow tablet, writing tablet. And it has a full chapter handwritten from the Song of Susanna, the scene where Roland and Eddie meet their creator. And Steve had written this passage while he was on the plane to visit this audiobook narrator. Frank Muller was his name. And he sent me this handwritten holographic chapter from the Dark Tower series. So that's my pride and joy, I would say.
Wow. Well, speaking of the Dark Tower, Derry Public Radio, they want to know, the Dark Tower companion novel is so well crafted and in depth. How much time did you spend in world writing that book and collecting these details?
For The Road to the Dark Tower, which was the first one, I probably read the series 6 or 7 times while I was working on it. I had read it numerous times previously, of course, but I went through it with different colored sticky notes and highlighters because I was looking for different sorts of things, looking for character references or special mid-world language or geographic details, so I could create timelines. One of the most interesting passes through was the one where I counted up every day to see, 2 days passed, 3 days passed, so I could do a really detailed timeline of how long they were actually the story from the beginning to end, how long that actually took. I would say probably 8 or 9 months to work on that first book. And then the second one came later when they announced that they were going to do a movie and the Marvel graphic novels had come out. I thought that there would be people who would be familiar with the Dark Tower universe who had never actually read the books. And so I wanted to create a companion for those sorts of people who maybe heard about, who's this Eddie Dean guy, or what's Magus all about, and they wanted a reference book that they could go back to and look things up. But I also got to interview a lot of very interesting people for that project. All of the artists in the early parts of the Marvel series. So Robin Firth, Peter David, who did the script, and then all of the people who did the pen and ink and the coloring. And to me, that was a fascinating part of the project because I didn't really know how a comic book was made at that point, and to hear each of them talk about their input into the project was fascinating. I interviewed King for that book. It was one of the, I think might have been the very first time that I actually formally interviewed him. I interviewed the people who were working on King's website because they had this interactive Discordia project where you could, play along and gather tokens and things like that in Midworld. So that one came along probably more quickly because I'd already had most of the basic research. But the books are completely different. There's almost no overlap between the two of them. So they were both fun and interesting to work on from different perspectives. The first one is a lot more analytical. A lot of it is me saying, did you notice this? This probably means that. Here's the influences that come into that. Where the second one is more, it's like the facts. If you're trying to find what the Kamala dance means, well, here's the definition of it, and here's the books it appears in. And it's more of a reference like that.
Our friends at the King Cast, and we know that you know them as well, they just tweeted and said, we don't have a question for Bev, but can you just tell him that he rules for us? So shout out to
according to this, Stephen King rules, so I don't know if we can both rule.
Maybe we can do a spin-off festival, though, and it can be Bev Vincent rules. Yeah.
Place your bets. And I heard that, I have to find it because someone's sending it to me. I'll just go directly to their page, to Derry Public Radio. I guess they made you a haiku. Oh, haiku
Oh, cool.
bonus round.
Ooh, very
They're
good.
not dicking around, you guys. We are, but they're just like, we're writing all day. So, Bev, this is for you. Shivers down my spine, a companion to King's mind. Bev's got a great eye. And we give Bev Vincent 5 out of 5 blue chambray shirts.
Yay!
Much appreciated. Derry Public Radio. Tune in every day.
No one's leaving here without a haiku. You get a haiku. You get a haiku. We all get a haiku.
Yeah, they were great. The folks, we were fortunate enough to be interviewed by them last week, I guess, and really just became quite fast friends. The KingCast people, too. I noticed that some people are asking in the comments about KingCast, and they are definitely following along, as you can see. They were a blast. We had a really
nice
great
session
time
with them recently.
Yes, they mentioned actually that you were about to be the very next day. I think actually that might have been. So that's really great. So obviously I'm a huge fan of your writing too. I've been since we've met. I've been reading as much of it as I can. I have a particular favorite that you know about, but I'm curious to know. What are you working on now? That's my question. What are you working on now? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh, I think he's going to go get it.
So, show and tell time.
Yay.
New book just out from Cemetery Dance. Brian Keane and I have this, it's 2 novellas. The book's called Dissonant Harmonies. My story is called The Dead of Winter. It's the longest piece of fiction that I've published up to this point.
Wow.
I also have another novella on Amazon called The Ogilvy Affair. I like to describe it as a hard-boiled egg of the Christie. So it's a detective story, but it's also a whodunit. This last month, I've been working with a gaming company that are about to do a Kickstarter launch. And they put out a call for stories for an anthology set in their world. And it's been an interesting experience because I didn't know anything about their world. They gave us the Bible and all of the details, and we had to work from that. And it was a little bit like writing in a foreign language. It took a little while to get my head wrapped around it, but it became a very interactive process. I'd send them a draft and they would sort of brainstorm about it and come back with some ideas about how I could tweak things to better fit what they wanted to do with their universe. And it's been fun. And that anthology, which doesn't have a name yet, though, will be out next month, I believe. There'll be 6 or 8 stories in it from people who just signed up to write stories for them in this 7,500 years in the future science fiction universe.
And is it a universe that is already in existence? Like, has the game already been published, or is this something that they're doing as a precursor to the launch of the game?
My understanding is that the game existed and then the rights lapsed, and that they may have then been able to collect the IP and then add their own spin on it. I don't think that the game exists yet, but there's lots of, these guys have really thought deeply about this world. You can sort of ask them any question about any esoteric little thing, and they can whip out a 10-page document that has this all very clearly delineated, and it's quite interesting. I've worked in sort of licensed universes before. I did a Doctor Who story and I did an X-Files story, but those were ones where I was already really very familiar with the lay of the land. This is one where I had to step in and learn a lot on the fly, and it was quite fun.
What's the Doctor Who story that you wrote?
I wrote one for an anthology called Doctor Who Destination Prague. It was a licensed anthology where all the stories had to be set in Prague. And mine is called Leap Second. And it all happens around the fact that there's going to be a leap second added to the world clock. And of course, Doctor Who is all about timey-wimey stuff. So
right.
Something nefarious is supposed to happen when that happens, and they have to. And it's the fifth Doctor, who is always sort of my Doctor, the Peter Davison
doctor. who is the father-in-law of the 10th Doctor, right? That's right, isn't he? Yes.
Indeed, indeed. He's the father-in-law of the 10th Doctor. Yeah. Yep. And his daughter is also the Doctor's daughter.
That's right. It gets very timey-wimey and
Or
confusing
Doctor's
in there.
wife, or-
Yes, right, because she's the Doctor's daughter in the episode, the Doctor's daughter, for sure.
That's right.
And now they have it. Yeah. It's well, sorry, I don't mean to hijack this with the Doctor Who conversation because we could totally be doing this for about an hour. I think Leah's looking at me. We have a few
I
more
was just
online.
looking at you, admitting like your level of geekdom that was up there. Really, I mean, which is like what this whole weekend is about. But his level is a little bit extra special.
I do fly my geek flag proudly, absolutely.
But this has been a lot of fun. What was seeing, because you talked about Jay Holman. I interviewed Jay for Cemetery Dance back in the day when Paranoid came out, and I've met Jim Cole. One time I was out in Los Angeles. He and I got together and had lunch, and he and I have corresponded quite a bit over the years. And during the heyday of the Dollar Babies, before it sort of blossomed so that there's too many to keep track, I used to keep pretty close tabs on them and write about them in Cemetery Dance. I remember writing about, there was an Autopsy Room 4 adaptation, which was particularly hilarious. So yeah, I've been very keyed into the Dollar Baby phenomenon for a long time.
You certainly have.
I think I even have the VHS tape that has The Woman in the Room and the Children of the Corn adaptation.
Sorry,
Awesome.
you said you had seen that one?
He's got the tape.
I have,
Oh, you
I
have
have
the
a copy
tape?
of the VHS
Oh.
tape. Yeah.
Maybe we could watch that.
You could actually
sometime.
buy that one back in the day. That
Oh,
one
could
was
you?
commercially available.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't realize that. I knew that there had been some that had skirted along with commercial rights, but that's very cool.
James was ready to sell you his children for that. I don't know if you saw that. He was, how can we watch this?
How can I find that?
Little hamster's just like, oh shit, which child? Which child?
Yeah, no, one of the twins.
Sorry, kids. You want to live with Uncle
They
Bev
might be
now?
watching this. No twin daughters. Yeah, everything's cool. Is there a Twitter question that you have there?
I have to find it again. There's just like so much love. It's endless scrolling, and I think that's just people are just losing their garbage that you're here. It's really fantastic.
Well, while she's looking, then let's talk a bit about Cemetery Dance because it's an amazing publication. Richard Chismar is involved in that as well. And how did you get involved with that? And what is it particularly about working with them that continues to excite you?
Well, they pay me for one thing. But back in the 90s, I was just giving away everything that I knew. And Rich Chismar came along in the late 90s and said, or about 2000, I guess, and said, we're going to start up the magazine again. It had been on a short hiatus. And he said, would you like to write the Stephen King news column for the magazine? And so ever since 2001, I've been writing news from the Dead Zone for every issue of the magazine. We also have an online version now to get the more current contemporary information out at newsfromthedeadzone.com. But Rich is great. He and I share secrets all the time because we're privy sometimes to inside information that we can't talk about. And so it's great to have the sounding board. And he's published a bunch of my short stuff, and he's done limited editions of some of my books. And it's just a great small press, and I've always enjoyed working with them.
Absolutely. They do pull out some great stuff. Did you have something?
No, but we within 2 minutes time, we do have to introduce our next film. I know that you want to stay here.
Yes,
you
I
should
do.
just I don't know. Let's just build a square into the screen. I'm already putting pressure on Matt and Logan in there. Be like, why is this not done? Why haven't you just asked him to be here all weekend with us? We're going to monopolize your time, obviously. But is there any last words you want to say to everybody watching around the globe right now?
Well, anybody can always find me online. I'm all over the place. I'm at Bev Vincent on Twitter. I have an Instagram and a Facebook, and I have a message board and a website and all those good things, bevvincent.com. It's always good to be connected up to the very enthusiastic King community, and also especially the Dollar Baby community, which is like a very integral sub-community within the larger King fandom, which is near and dear to my heart.
Well, we can't
And
thank
I
you.
look forward to seeing the doctor's case again because I've seen it 2 or 3 times now. And for anybody who hasn't seen it, you're in for a real treat.
That's
Wow,
so
that is so
kind.
kind of you. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come and talk with us today. It was a real treat for all of us, and keep on keeping on because we can't wait to see everything else. We will throw some links on our Twitter as well to the books that you've shown us, so that people can definitely get out there and start reading some of your longer material. And I can't wait until we can chat again in public about some other projects in the future.
Bye, Bev.
Absolutely. Great talking to you.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everyone.